Hey everybody, this is Brian Kelly with Association Mavens, where you get direct access to some of the foremost thinkers and teachers in the association industry. I'm super pleased to introduce my guest today, Ben Martin, who has 12 years of experience in the association industry. Ben has helped hundreds of associations launch and nurture their own private online communities, which is huge these days. And he's also done a ton of consulting, coaching, and training in this area. Additionally, he is the Chief Engagement Officer for Online Community Results, a company that specializes in private social communities for associations. So Ben, welcome to Association Mavens. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, it's fantastic to be with you. Thanks for inviting me on to the show.
Absolutely. Well, this is an area that I think is kind of a hot topic for the last few years. This whole thing has exploded with online communities, and many associations have been able to take advantage of the opportunity, but there's still struggles, and I think there's still a lot of confusion around the best ways to leverage a private online community. So let's just dive right into some of the questions that I've got for you, if that sounds cool.
Let's go for it.
All right. So the first thing I wanted to ask you is really, what is the biggest challenge that you see out there when you're meeting with associations when it comes to online communities? What's like the huge hurdle for associations in this particular area?
Well, associations are having a hard time with it. I think some of it stems from the field of dreams mentality that some people have about online communities. Like, if we build it, they will come. That's just simply not the case. I would kind of trace the issues that folks are having to two things. And actually, where a lot of consultants might say the big problem is strategy, I actually find that it's not usually the strategy that's the primary hurdle that people are running into. The big one is failing to put somebody on the project. Again, a lot of organizations think that it's if you build it, they will come, and it just doesn't work that way. So the top concern that I have whenever I go into a client is who's the community manager, and many organizations they don't have one, or it's a part-time assignment. What we find is that if it's assigned out part-time, unfortunately, when push comes to shove, those people are going to do what's urgent or what's familiar. And so if it's time for the conference, they're going to get pulled onto the conference, or if it's time to edit the magazine, they're going to get pulled onto editing the magazine. That's why we recommend that folks have a dedicated community manager, even if it's a part-time position. At least that person then is not going to be pulled onto other projects when push comes to shove. So we highly recommend that you have a dedicated community manager. Another alternative is outsourcing it. We actually do a little bit of outsourcing here, but we don't like to do it for more than about 6 months because we just don't have the body of knowledge to really get the content, get the conversations going. So number one thing is lack of resources put on it. The number two thing typically is a bad strategy that could either be sourced from that the strategy isn't in line with the organization's overall strategic objectives. Yeah. And if your community strategy is out of sorts or out of line with the overall organization strategy, then it just becomes like a bolt-on activity. And again, when push comes to shove, the bolt-on activities tend to get pushed to the side. And then the other strategy failure that we see is I have this community strategy and I don't understand why my members aren't engaging with my strategy. And what has happened is the strategy doesn't really take into consideration the motivations that your members have to engage online. So we always tell clients, your strategy for your online community has to equally take into consideration your members' motivation to be involved and the organization's strategic objectives.
Yeah. I mean, that's so good. I mean, a lot of these things it's really basic. I mean, strategy is key, right? But as you said, I mean, that's lower than even just this pure, simple issue of having somebody focused on facilitating, coordinating, engaging with the members on this online community. I mean, that's such a fundamental thing that I think it's overlooked quite often. But and I've even seen it firsthand myself, that once you have somebody in that role and they're able to really shine the spotlight on different things that are relevant to that community, can interact and dialogue with the individuals participating on the online platform, that it's almost like there's something here versus that tumbleweed zone that we've seen so many times with online communities, where nobody's responding to questions, nobody's really posting anything, there's not really any engagement, and you need to have somebody there to facilitate that.
Definitely. Yeah, we always tell folks to, if you're a community manager, kind of think of yourself as the party host.
Yep.
So, go to a party and maybe I only know, the host. But what the host does as a good host, he introduces me to other people. He helps me make connections. So he would say, hey, Brian, your friend Joe also knows Ben.
Yep.
So making those connections, introducing people, basically making me feel welcome. And it's so funny that, it's those little things that really lead to the engagement that most organizations are looking to achieve with their online communities.
Well, that's a good analogy too. I like, taking that real world example of the party host and applying that to online communities, because that's what it is. I mean, it's a gathering, it's a social gathering online. So a lot of the same principles are applicable even in a real social environment. So
definitely.
Perfect. Okay. Now let's dive into seeing if you can explain for me the biggest value that these types of online communities, private online social networks, provide for associations.
Yep. Well, engagement is the buzzword that's out there right now. And I always go back to the ASAE study that was released, I think it was in 2007, called The Decision to Join. It was a great book published by ASAE, and basically what they found is that the more engaged a member is, the more likely that member is to renew their membership, to evangelize about membership, to attend events, to volunteer, and to give voluntarily to other causes like a PAC or a foundation. And so online communities are just another way to engage members in a way that we couldn't before. The way that we used to engage members was through the magazine and through face-to-face events and through volunteering. And those were really the only ways we could engage members. And then we started sending email newsletters, and we started saying, well, when they open up the newsletter, that's a form of engagement. And when they're engaging with me online, whether it's like LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, that counts as engagement too. So an online community is just another way to engage those members. So there's also this phrase, return on engagement. And I'm a big believer in return on engagement, but the biggest value for an association is to get beyond return on engagement and get to return on investment. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're looking to do with these communities. Is like we're investing in them, so let's make sure that we're getting a good return on that. So what we work with customers to do is to fill up 8 buckets of revenue. And there's some direct revenue like advertising, sponsorship sales, pay for access. But then we say there's these other 5 buckets over here, and you have to find a way to draw a straight line between the engagement in your community and the dollars and cents. So, how much more likely are your members to renew if they're involved in the online community versus if they're not involved with it? And I know that, over at Aptify, that's one thing that you guys are working on is, that whole engagement scoring and the ability to factor in online community engagement into the overall engagement scoring is critical. I mean, that's how you really prove the return on investment. And I don't have to talk to you about the concept of lifetime value of a member and all those things. Like, your audience gets that, but this is just another input source for that engagement scoring to help you get that 360-degree view of your member. So we always tell folks, you've got to find a way to draw a straight line between engagement in your online community and financial results. One of my soapbox issues is every community manager needs to be prepared for the day when the powers that be ask you, what's the ROI of our online community? And I think by extension then, what's the ROI of your continued employment with this organization? And if you can't answer that question, you're going to be in a pickle. All right, it's going to be hard to explain why they should keep you around if you can't show, in dollars and cents, here's the value that we're getting from it. So that's just a little soapbox item for me. If you're a community manager, make sure you can answer the ROI question because at some point it's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, social media is such a big thing that's being leveraged, and for those that are doing it right, has a tremendous impact. But this is something that's even more focused, even more targeted when you break it down to the online community that the association's providing the membership. I think thinking through just those very buckets that you suggest is such a great idea, to be able to say, look, these are the things that are happening, and that there is an exact correlation to the success that we're having in other areas of the business, or how this ties into the strategic goals of our organization. Because it's not just people sharing things, through Twitter or, on Facebook, or whatever it is, through, regular social media channels. It's very targeted to, again, that online social gathering place that has been set up by the organization, and there's a ton of value that can be provided.
Yep, definitely.
Cool. So Ben, what are your thoughts on this? There's a lot of options in the marketplace, and I know that you've recently, not too long ago, in conjunction with Social Fish, had put out this ebook kind of breaking down the different solutions that are out there. What, kind of in a nutshell, should an association be thinking about when they're considering the multitude of options for an online community?
Well, the number one thing that we tell every organization to look for is an integration with your back office AMS, your back office database, member management database. That's key. That does a whole host of things for me. It helps me to keep members in the right groups. So, for example, if I have a group just for affiliate members, I can make sure that my affiliate members are assigned there, and if they happen to make the jump over to a regular member, they get reassigned into the regular member group. It helps me keep their member profile up to date, so they don't have to update it in two places. Typically, you'll also see a single sign-on into other association web properties. The back office database integration is the number one thing we tell people to look for. Beyond that, you're looking for notifications. You want to have some nice email notifications to work with. The number one way that people engage with an online community is when they get that digest, or when they get those notifications, they click through to participate, or they reply to the email. It's kind of has like a listserv functionality. But the notifications are critical. You want to be able to style them, put your branding around it. You want to have lots and lots of links within the digests and notifications that drive people back into the community. Ideally, you'd like to be able to see when people actually click on them. So you'd like to be able to see a click-through rate. Most platforms right now haven't gotten to that level of sophistication, but some of them do tell you in aggregate how many have been pushed out there. Some of them give you the open rate as well. But what we really like to see is the click-through rate, because then we can tell to a person who clicked on what and what actually pulled them into the community. And we're always looking for data on how people are engaging. And when we can get to that level of detail, it gives us a lot more information to use to configure the platform in a way that's going to optimize the engagement.
Yeah. So do you see a lot of associations that maybe have chosen a solution that doesn't tie into their AMS, or doesn't have a lot of those tracking capabilities that you mentioned?
Increasingly, I'm seeing associations opt for a solution that does have the back office integration. There was a time early on when a lot of folks were using platforms like Ning, which is a great platform in and of itself, but they don't have that back office integration. The software selection guide that you mentioned earlier outlines 7 of the leading solutions for associations and nonprofits. Maybe within the show notes or something here, we can provide a link to that. The tools have gotten a lot better, and they continue to get better. By and large, I'm seeing organizations choose kind of an enterprise grade online community platform, and that back office database integration is critical. And so by and large, I'm seeing things move in that direction.
Good. All right, so here's the big question for you. Why can't an association use Facebook, like a private Facebook group, to set up this community online where they can engage with their members. Obviously people, use LinkedIn groups.
Yep.
Like, what's the benefits, the motivation, so on and so forth, on why it's important to have your own private community that's set up specifically for your association members?
Right. Well, I think actually you need both. I wouldn't ever advise a client not to do Facebook in favor of doing a private online community. Yeah. The reality of the situation is that you really do need both. But here's why you shouldn't put all your chickens or whatever, all your eggs in that basket. The reason is, and this has come up a lot in the media recently, is that your posts in Facebook aren't getting viewed. You've probably read recently that Facebook has changed the way that the news feed works. And what they found was that the more posts that you and I see from our friends, the more posts you and I make. Yeah. The more posts they see from businesses and organizations, the fewer posts you and I will make. Yeah. So they've actually changed the way that the newsfeed works so that organizations, their stories aren't being viewed in the same way that ours are. Yeah. In addition to that, I like to say that when you use LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, you are not the customer, you're the product. And basically what LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Google Plus are all doing is mining our data and reselling it to somebody else. Yeah. So, just from a philosophical point of view, wouldn't you rather get the benefit of your members' engagement within your own community than engaging your members on those public social networking sites and letting all the benefit go to LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and so on and so forth? Yeah. So that's yet another reason. Finally, there's no way to bring the data back from LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter. Once when the engagement's happening over there, it belongs to them, and they will never show you the data. But when you use an integrated online community with your back office, when that's integrated with your back office database, then all that data can come back to me, and then I can see that, Brian has has gotten engaged in this conversation about X. Yeah. Well, we're having a conference about X next month, and now I can communicate with him to say, hey, we noticed that you're interested in this topic. We have an opportunity for you to learn more about it at a conference. So, things like that nice. are some of the key reasons to use an online community. And then as for all of your public-facing social media sites, I like to recommend that people, to go back to the party host analogy, use that as the place to invite people into your community, to your party. Yeah. So I'll use Facebook to say, hey, there's a cool conversation happening right now in my online community on budgeting. Bob had a great post about it. Click here to read it. And I draw them back into my community. So I use those as my outposts as kind of like the party invitations, if you will. So it's important not to just abandon those. You have to use those to keep people coming into your community. But in a nutshell, those are the reasons that we recommend having an online community in addition to your public facing social media efforts.
Yeah, so it's basically not like saying, well, we don't need this or we need that. These are layers.
Yeah.
And I think your mentioning of those social media outlets as outposts that allow you to interact with a varied group of people that might be a good audience for the content that your association is sharing through its private social network.
Yep.
And drawing those folks in. That's a pretty great approach to that. And I think the thing that actually really pops in my mind right now is, where do you see this going? I mean, technology changes rapidly, obviously. Facebook, Twitter, these are the big ones right now. Social media is constantly changing. Do you see that impacting the world or the realm of online community platforms? Or do you have any insight into the direction that things are evolving on this particular front?
Yeah, so it's been cool to see some of the innovations that are coming down the road. I will tell you, I don't see it a whole lot from Well, I'll just go straight to the point here. I have one client who's working on a project to actually build a private social network on top of a public social media outlet. I can't say too much about it because I'm under NDA with them.
Yeah.
But this is one of the trends that I think we may start to see coming down the road, is that we'll have private online communities that are just stacked on top of some kind of public facing social media site. Um, that would be a huge game changer in the industry, because one of the biggest hurdles to getting members to engage in your online community is that it's yet another site I have to keep up with. Well, imagine if like your online community were hosted within, let's just say it was Facebook, and you actually did get the data moving back and forth. That's something that I have a client that right now is working on that. It's yet to be seen if they can pull it off, but if they can, it's going to be pretty interesting. The other cool thing I'm starting to see is there's an organization there's a company that's building this new profile building algorithm, basically. So instead of me having to divulge all this information about myself during a profile setup, it actually builds it for me. So it'll read my posts and read the discussions that I've clicked through on, and it'll dynamically build a profile for me. Now, I think that's a little bit creepy, but it is pretty powerful, and quite frankly, it's data that we all have access to. With this one in particular, what I didn't like about it was that it took this profile and made it publicly available. That didn't pass the smell test for me. But if by participating in an online community, I can develop a profile about my members that I can use then to better communicate with them. I see a lot of value in that. So, while this organization was looking to make that public facing, I was like, I don't know if I like that. But if it was available to me as the association exec, I think I'd be interested in that as well. So there's a little bit happening out there. Right now I'm not seeing a ton of like really huge innovations. It looks like most of the vendors that we think of for the association community are really working on solidifying the base of their product. There's a little bit of innovation happening around the edges, but by and large, and I think this is as it should be, most of the platforms seem to be really investing in the basics, which really is what's needed at this point. There are a lot of bells and whistles in the software packages that are out there, but what we're finding is that the simplest things work best. So the forums, the notifications.
Getting out of the way of your members and allowing them to interact with one another, to interact with your organization and your staff is ultimately that's the end goal. And to not have a ton of stuff interfere with that is probably a big essential aspect of it.
Yep, focusing on the basics is critical. I mean, we spend most of our time with our clients saying, no, you shouldn't do that. No, you shouldn't do that. Stay focused on the basics, and then at some point down the road, then you can expand into these other things. But until you get the basics right, it's not a good idea to start implementing all the bells and whistles.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Ben, I think the thing, circling back to what you were talking about with the building the private community on top of a public, social media channel, so to speak, is interesting. I know I follow a lot of online marketers who are information marketers, and I've seen a lot of them lately creating communities where if they're selling XYZ, they're going to teach you how to build a better online community or a more engaged member of communities, and they've got this course and they're going to deliver it to you through a private Facebook group. And when you join, you get access to that private Facebook group. You're able to interact with the other students or members of that group to talk about the different training modules that they've shared. You can ask questions of the person who's kind of the facilitator or the expert in the group, and it's all done within Facebook to where you don't need a special username, password. You just log into Facebook, you click on the group. Nobody else has access to it that isn't a member of that group.
Right.
When you get a notification, it pops right up there, in your dashboard, so you can see, somebody posted something in that group that you may want to check out.
Right.
So it's really interesting, this idea of leveraging that, and I'm curious to see where things go over the coming years as new opportunities spring up. But that's really fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. I've always said that if LinkedIn created that API where I could place members into groups, that I think it would be game over. I think they would have the market, but for whatever reason, they're not interested in doing it. So that's good news for the 7 people, the 7 organizations that are listed in the online community software selection guide that we're talking about earlier.
Cool. Well, Ben, I want to thank you so much for doing this interview. It was a great conversation talking with you about some of these basic nuts and bolts aspects of online communities. So thanks again.
You're very welcome. Glad to do it.
I also want to thank everybody for watching. I'm always enjoy bringing you some great conversations, and want to make sure that you sign up in the upper right-hand corner of this site. You can jump on the list to stay updated on all things Association Mavens related. Also, be sure to follow @BrianKellyNow, and let us know who you'd like to see on this show. You can also send us an email through the website to see who you'd like to nominate to be a guest on the show. So thanks again, and I look forward to bringing you another great interview. Until next time, bye-bye.